Hello everyone, and welcome to another beer review. Now, today we're doing the final kind of instalment of the kind of Christmas beer, the kind of a copy of Old Peculier. So I've poured it off, and it's sitting there, and this was the last kind of conditioning tweak that we actually did, because we did basically three. We did one as is, we did one with muscovado sugar, and this one was done with the treacle, which I told you about, that I spilled all over the blooming kitchen and made a right bloody mess. So this has basically been conditioning for quite a period now. I gave it basically almost, well, this is now, what day is today? This is the 30th now, so I've been doing this basically almost a full month of January, plus I think the condition started roughly about mid-December, so it's basically had almost at least a month and a half, roughly, of conditioning with the addition of the primer, which was molasses or treacle, basically Black Treacle. So we'll see how this one basically goes. Now, some people might not be interested in this. It's just kind of a little kind of homebrew type of thing we were doing. So what I will do is I'll also basically film another review. So I'll put both of these out together. So if you're not interested, you can watch the other one, and that might basically be more enjoyable for you. If you are interested in it, then hey, you get a bonus. So there's the Old Peculier. So we're doing that versus this. You see. Now apparently with the Black Treacle it's supposed to be closer to what Theakston's actually do themselves when they're making Old Peculier. Well, we'll find out about that. But in the meantime, this is the kind of the last one. So the first one, the first conditioning didn't go too well because it was left in the fermenter, and unfortunately we had some issues with temperature, and I was too slow to react to these things, and I think that caused irreversible damage during the kind of conditioning, unfortunately. The second one, which was basically primed with muscovado sugar, that was better, so it was. It was still not quite the same as the Old Peculier, the original. There was good points and kind of bad points in relation to it being like that, but in general it was quite a nice beer. So as a standalone beer it was quite nice. As a copy of Old Peculier original, well, it was probably lacking a little bit in some ways. So what I will do is I will start off with my one first, but what I'll do is I'll pour this to give it a chance to settle. So we will. I'll give it a chance to settle. And we can also give it a chance to kind of compare the kind of the aromas. Well, there we go. I've actually managed to pour a kind of decent one for a change. There we go. You see. One thing I have noticed is it's a lot darker head. It's more of a tan coloured head. If you see my mine is, it's a bit lighter. It's not too far away, but this is just a bit darker than this. Colour wise, I would say they're fairly close. I would say this is a little bit lighter than this. This is a bit more darker. So that is. So my one's just slightly more darker, slightly more black. You can see this gets slightly more of a kind of rubyish at the bottom. I've got a little bit of ruby at the bottom, but as it goes up the glass, this is darker. So there you go. Smell wise, well, I'm definitely getting dark roasted malts. Left, right and centre there. Getting a bit of dark roasted malt, but a lot lighter. I'm getting kind of a strong malty sweetness off this. I am probably getting molasses. I am getting wafts of molasses in there as well. So let's try this one. Well, let's have a good comparison. There we go. That's a good one. With my little head in the middle. There we go. So we'll try my one first, and we'll see what it's like. Oh. Right. Well, the dark treacle, the black treacle's there, definitely. The molasses flavour's there, especially in the aftertaste. There is that kind of burnt sugar kind of bitterness in the aftertaste there. At the front, yeah, I'm getting the dark roasted malts. I'm not picking up so much sweetness, but again, it just depends. It takes me a while to kind of acclimatise. I'm not picking up the kind of main sweetness. Let's see what this one's like. Right. Initially, these are a bit closer. I'm noticing just by tasting them. I think it's just the way my mouth is kind of acclimatised right now. It's just the case that it's not really picking up the sweetness from either of them just now. Which is probably a good thing because it's picking up the kind of the bitterness better. And I think that's where things was wrong in the second one, the first one we did with a primer in the conditioning process, which of course was muscovado sugar. Now that didn't really give us the bitterness. It was giving us some bitterness, but it was giving us a different type of bitterness. It wasn't the same type of bitterness as you're getting with the kind of original. And the original does have a bit of that kind of burnt sugar, kind of molasses bitterness that you get. I mean, molasses is a strange one. Black Treacle is a kind of a strange one because even if you do taste it, it gives you the initial sweetness, but then it does give you that kind of slight bitterness in the aftertaste after eating it. And then of course it does the same if you're adding molasses to any kind of baking. My mum always said was you could add that little bit of extra sugar to kind of balance it up, because of there will be a bitterness within coming from the aftertaste, and that was the situation. My mum was a very good baker, and even she understood that process. Now, none of these had additional sugar apart from the primer. So when I did the muscovado sugar, it was just the muscovado sugar. There was no other sugar, extra sugar added, and it was the same when I did the black treacle or molasses. It was just that added. And the way I primed them was we did the 2 5-litre batches, and they both basically got 100 millilitres of each. So basically, the first primer that we did was a 5-litre separate kind of carbonated prime in basically an enclosed cask, pressurised cask, and they had muscovado, and then the second one just had the molasses or black treacle added. So that's how it was basically done. So it was basically the original brew just with the primer, and see how it's done. And it has to a degree made quite a difference. What I would say is there's a little bit of sweetness in the aftertaste with the original, which isn't there in my one so much, and I think that's because obviously I will say that the kind of molasses flavours with my one is just that little bit more prominent. And I thought, well, 100 ml isn't going to be going too crazy in a 5-litre batch. It's not really be too bad. And it has probably made more of a difference than the 100 ml of muscovado sugar. The muscovado sugar had kind of improved from the original, but it's hard to say because my control was kind of buggered anyway, because it was basically went through kind of a bit of yeast stress, and yeah, it was a bit of a disaster actually. So I kind of lost that kind of control factor, but it did obviously improve because it didn't have suffer the same kind of fate as the original that was left in the fermenter and was put out in the shed. Whereas these ones were both inside in a nice kind of controlled environment, and yeah, they kind of flourished compared to the original. But yes, I was getting a bit more sweetness in the aftertaste, but I was getting a slightly different bitterness, which was kind of really changing the aftertaste. And one of the things is with the Old Peculier, it does have a bitterness, but also has a kind of a sweetness there as well. That it's kind of, it kind of makes it kind of slightly moreish in some ways to a lot of people, because there's just that nice kind of balanced finish. But just as much as there is bitterness, there is quite a bit of sweetness there in the aftertaste. I was getting something a bit different, and it was slightly imbalanced in some ways with the muscovado sugar. Whereas this one, I would say it is closer to the original, but just lacking that little bit of sweetness, and that could be down to maybe it's a little bit too much, but I'd probably say it's probably a little bit too much Black Treacle or molasses for 5 litres, so I think 100ml is a bit too much, but I could probably have done with some additional kind of sugar as well, maybe some priming sugar or something like that, just to kind of add that little bit of sweetness during the conditioning as well. But yeah. I would say they're a lot closer than the other two. It's the only thing that I'd probably say is missing is, well, the two things I would probably say between mine and the original of this one is the molasses flavour is probably just a little bit stronger than the original, so you're getting more slightly kind of molasses flavour than the original. The aftertaste is closer, but I would say it's lacking the kind of sweetness as much as the original. There is a bit of sweetness in the aftertaste, but it's lacking a little bit of sweetness compared to the original, and probably still a little bit too much bitterness. So I think is the case as though if I was doing this again, I'd probably tone back. I definitely would make it and prime it with the molasses. I think that's definitely required, and has made a good difference to basically getting it a lot closer. But what I would say is, per 5 litres, I think 100ml of molasses or Black Treacle is a bit too much, and I'd probably dial it back a little bit. Maybe, I don't know, maybe halving it between basically 50ml and 75 millilitres, I think would probably be better for a 500 litre. So per 500 litre, at least basically, if you're doing it that way, then around about the kind of 10% mark would probably be better. No, not 10%, it's actually 1%, sorry. So yes, I think there's a case as though that what I've added was maybe just a little bit too much, but I would also add a little bit of additional sugar just to kind of allow for a little bit of extra sweetness as well, just to kind of help balance it. Well, this is a nice beer on its own right. It is a little bit too much of the molasses, probably, in my view. But mouthfeel's nice, carbonation nice, because I've put it through the beer machine and I've carbonated it to the way I want it. And like I've said before, if you're looking for a draft machine that can do quite a lot of things, then I would probably recommend going for it. Now, this is the Beer Monster, but there's lots of other different kind of brands and manufacturers make exactly the same. It's a very generic kind of beer machine that you can buy. It doesn't have to be the Beer Monster version, it can be any type of version, but I would probably say that type of version of beer machine is probably a lot more useful and a lot more functionality than quite a lot of them. I mean, everybody likes the Philips kind of perfect draft system, which is fine. I don't see that as a problem, apart from one, you can only really use their kegs in it, and two, the kegs are quite pricey, and again, you're quite kind of limited. Now, even though that people say, oh, but they've got quite a good selection. They do, but the problem is they're all kind of slightly more mainstream brands, apart from maybe Jeremy Clarkson's and maybe the odd other. But again, they're more kind of mainstream brands from kind of main manufacturers. The good thing about this type of machine is it takes any kind of standard 5 litre keg that can be done from a lot of small breweries, that kind of standard kind of 5 litre keg. Plus it also takes the kind of, is it the Heineken kind of pressurised kegs as well. So you've got a lot of different kind of brewers that use the Heineken kegs, which of course they dispense from the top. So of course this also has an adapter that can also do that as well. So with this one you can add your own CO2, which means it's great for home brewing, because if you want, you can basically condition your beer without any priming and without any kind of pressurization, and then just do it all in the machine, and the machine will kind of, you can add as much as CO2 as you want. Obviously that CO2 is going to cost you money because you have to buy the little kind of pressurized canisters, but you can choose to do that yourself. And even though this was pressurized and there was some carbonation, although what I did notice was there was less carbonation when I was releasing and kind of depressurizing before I started to decant from the conditioning cask into the kind of dispensing cask. There wasn't much. There was a lot more in the Muscovado. The Muscovado sugar did give it a lot more. They used a lot more food from that point of view, and I think that's one of the things that I probably learned is there's probably, even though you are putting a kind of more kind of raw form of sugar into it, it's not providing so much food for the yeast for secondary kind of fermentation. So you would probably need to add, like I said, first sugar and also to kind of help with the pressurization. So I've had to add more CO2 for this one than I added for the one previously that was done with the Muscovado sugar. So it's all a kind of a learning curve, and that's one of the things is with home brewing, is you try something, you learn from it, and then you make the little tweaks the next time you do it. So of course the next time I'll do it, I will do these tweaks. So it has been a very good exercise, and also a lot of the kind of feedback and kind of recommendations and advice from the viewers have helped, because a few viewers, especially one particular, was basically singing on about doing it with the Black Treacle or stroke molasses, and yes, I would definitely say they were right in that factor, because it has brought it a lot closer than the Muscovado sugar. I think probably would have been better, there's maybe a bit of Muscovado sugar and kind of Black Treacle kind of mix, I think would probably go better. And I think that would bring us closer, because it would bring us that sweetness that I know I can get in the aftertaste with the Muscovado sugar. And it also gives me the extra additional carbonation build up, because it is providing more food for the yeast. But the molasses stroke Black Treacle is obviously providing a lot more flavour that's found in the original. So from that point of view, it's quite good. You can see the original. There you go. It's totally flat as a witch's tit, as I say. And I would say that with this one, because it's coming from the bottle, is a bit more carbonation in that one than with my one, because I don't want so much carbonation. But yeah, but as a drink on its own, it's a nice drink. But yeah, it has a little bit more bitterness in the aftertaste. There's a bit of sweetness, but it's got a bit more bitterness and less sweetness than the original. But I would say overall, as a beer, it's a lot closer out of the three of them. A lot closer. And I think if I made these kind of tweaks the next time, I could get it even closer, if not almost spot on from that point of view. So that's been actually quite good from that point of view. And if anybody's maybe interested in the recipe or something like that, then if they want to leave anything in the comments, I'm quite happy to give them the recipe that I used. And obviously any recommendations that I've learned from doing it myself, that what I would probably change the next time, and it's up to them whether they choose to do it. So if you are interested, just ask and I'll pass it on to you. Not a problem. And yeah, I think it's been a worthwhile exercise. I hope it's been fun. I hope it's brought a bit of kind of entertainment and maybe a little bit of education. I've definitely learned something from it, and I hope people that have been interested in it have learned something themselves. Now, it's a case of, though, I don't know if anybody is interested in, I don't know, I don't really want it turning into so much of a brewing channel, because it is supposed to be more of a reviewing channel, but if anybody actually wants us to actually brew a beer and actually film it and show them the kind of processes that I use and some of the kind of kit that I use. Again, as the case is, so there's lots of different kit you can use to brew beer, and you can brew good beer with very basic kit, and you can brew crap beer with really expensive kit. And I'll be totally honest, it's not really down to the kit so much. Yes, sometimes the kit can be a bit restrictive to the type of beer you're going to be brewing and everything else, but in reality it's really down to the person kind of being diligent and being careful, following the recipe, being accurate, and actually the more care you put into it, the better product you're going to get out of it. And obviously don't make basic mistakes and things like that, like make sure that obviously everything's totally clean and sterilised. Make sure your temperatures are really controlled better, because obviously I got caught out with the original that everything was going great, but we had a bit of a cold snap with snow and basically minus temperatures, and the brew was basically sitting there unprotected, conditioning out in the shed, and yeah, unfortunately the temperatures dropped too low for a period long enough for it to be a big problem for it, and it caused yeast stress, which started to kind of release certain flavours that really shouldn't be there, and yeah, I paid the price for that. So again, it doesn't matter how expensive your fermenter is or whatever and that type of stuff, I would have got the same results because of the environment wasn't right, and that was down to me. So it was bad management by me. So again, if anybody's kind of interested and wants me to actually do a full brew, then I will do, but I'll do it as a separate video, and if you're interested, then I'll do that. But I obviously want to keep this more as a review channel, but I'm quite happy to do kind of little kind of special kind of videos or additional videos that people can watch over and above what I normally put out, if they're more interested in that as well. And I think I've mentioned this in the comments with some of the other videos. So the temperatures are starting to kind of, we're getting to the end of January, like I said, this is the 30th, so we're now getting into probably kind of February time. I've got quite a few different things that I need to kind of concentrate on with work, so probably between around mid-February I'm going to have a little break from the brewing. Plus I've got a bit of beer to drink anyway, the kind of the last dregs of the Christmas beer. But probably about from mid-February I'm going to be looking to try and do a Yorkshire bitter. That's what the next thing I want to do. One of the reasons why is I do like a Yorkshire bitter, and unfortunately it's very difficult to get it down where I live, down in Devon. So what I will be doing is, it's like when I lived in Russia as a good example, was a lot of things I couldn't get in Russia, so I just used to make it. And a lot of times if you can basically fill these kind of gaps, I think that adds to the kind of being homesick and everything else, but I never got homesick living in Russia for all those kind of years, is because I could make the kind of things that reminded me of home, or the kind of things I was maybe craving, and it also made it interesting, it also made it a bit more personal. So if I was making kind of Lawrence sausage or square sausage, then I was doing it myself and things like that, and I could also kind of tweak it to exactly what I wanted and things like that. So again, it made it more personal. Although there was a period where, I don't know, but I had a craving for ginger beer for some strange reason, and I'm not a big drinker of ginger beer. I like ginger ale and ginger beer, but I don't drink it very often. I'd say my mum was probably a bigger consumer of ginger beer and everything else. And I was trying to make the soft drink version, and unfortunately I inadvertently really did make it alcoholic, which brought a whole new situation for me and a whole new sensation. So yeah, so that type of situation is like, if I got this attitude, if you can't get it, then have a go at making it. And I would recommend that to anybody. There's no point in bleating and saying, well, I can't get this or I can't get that where I am. Why not have a go at making it, if possible, obviously. You've got to be realistic. If it's possible, then give it a go. If it's completely impossible, then you've got to be realistic and say, well, on a small scale, it's just not viable. So yeah, I know I'm waffling kind of thing, but it's a good way to be, because it basically means that you have a bit more control over your life, and sometimes convenience isn't everything. Sometimes being able just to go out and buy something that you need doesn't always kind of deliver. And yeah, I mean, it was a strange one, because there's better things in Russia that I couldn't get, but I could get iron brew. I could get iron brew and shortbread. Neither of the things I was particularly wanting, because to be totally honest, my mum made really good shortbread, so if I wanted shortbread, I think my mum's one would probably be better, and of course I've got the recipe so I could make it myself. Iron brew, well, I didn't mind iron brew, things like that, but as I got older and everything else, I started to drink less soft drinks in general, so of course iron brew just didn't really come into it. So when I was living in Russia, and there's this kind of big 2-litre bottles of iron brew, but like, although I'm trying to remember, one of the fast food outlets used to sell iron brew, which I thought was very strange. It wasn't McDonald's, and I don't know whether it was KFC, or whether it was Burger King, or whether it was Wendy's, I can't remember. One basically was selling iron brew as an option, although I never did that, because they were always usually selling beer as well. That's what I liked about Russia, that you could buy beer at the fast food, which was quite good, and a lot of times you used to do a 2-for-1 offer, so I could maybe get a kind of a litre of Sebersky Corona for sweeties. For basic, well, I'll be totally honest, it was very cheap, really cheap. I think roughly about what, I could get basically a litre for roughly about 50 to 70 pence. You could understand why I didn't get homesick, but with the type of prices, but yeah. So yeah, it's been a worthwhile exercise. Out of 10, what would I give this, just before we finish up? Yeah, the molasses is quite there. Out of 10, what would I give this? As being close to the original, I'm going to give this a 7. I'm going to give this a 7 as being close to the original. I would say 7, yeah. It's really not that far away as being, close to the original. But as a beer in its own right, it's probably got a little bit too much of the kind of Black Treacle flavouring to it, that's just slightly kind of taking the edge off it from that point of view. I mean, it is very drinkable and things like that, but it's quite if you're comparing it to a beer that doesn't have such a strong, but still has obviously a kind of a molasses stroke Black Treacle kind of addition to it. I do prefer the mouthfeel of Marwin to the original from the bottle, but overall, I'm going to give it I want to say I want to give it a 5, really. I want to give it a 5 because it's probably a little bit too much. I think if it was dialed back a bit more, so it's less kind of invasive in the beer flavour, then yeah, I would probably, if I just dialed it back a little bit more, I could probably jump to a 7. If I added a little bit extra sugar to it just to give it, then yes, I think it would probably go higher. But as a beer in its own right, it's just a little bit too much of the kind of Black Treacle kind of flavouring to it that kind of in my view, affecting the beer a bit too much. But again, that's down to me, and it is kind of trial and error. I mean, how much do you add? And you think, well, 100 ml in 5 litres isn't really that much, but it's obviously enough to react and really kind of stamp its kind of flavour profile on it. So yeah, so the beer in its own right, I'm going to give it a 5 because probably the molasses is a bit too much. The flavouring of the Black Treacle and the kind of slightly lack of sweetness in the aftertaste, so you're getting a bit more bitterness, which again is fine, but it's just a little bit too much. As for being close to the original, it really isn't that far away, and I would probably say it's about a 7, so it's about 3 points away. And I think it's a case of reducing the kind of Black Treacle amount, adding a little bit of kind of muscovado sugar to kind of feed the yeast and obviously give it a bit more sweetness in the aftertaste that I was getting with that type. I think, yes, I would probably get it closer to at least a 9, I would probably say. I think I could get it a couple of points closer to the original. And then, of course, obviously boosting that up, I think it would probably get it close to kind of at least a 7, maybe getting on to an 8 if we get everything right. And of course, obviously, if I'm giving the carbonation more to my kind of personal taste, then again, yes, it would probably get it closer to an 8, because there's all these different types of scenarios. I mean, I might like Old Peculier as a beer and give it a certain score, but of course there's certain things that, of course, I would, if I was doing it myself, I would just dial back the carbonation a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So even then, the actual originals is not a perfect beer. None of it is. This is the thing. I've never found a perfect beer yet. I mean, we've found some damn good beers over the years, but I've never found a perfect beer, because I don't think a perfect beer exists, because we're all different. And every beer has its little kind of letdowns. That's just reality. Some beers have a hell of a lot of letdowns. But anyway, as a comparison to the original, 7 out of 10. As a beer in its own right, it's just a little bit too much of the kind of Black Treacle or molasses flavouring, so it's a 5 out of 10 for that. So, I hope you enjoyed the series. If you did, and you want to recommend a specific beer that we have a go at doing the same to, I'm trying to kind of do a copy of, then let us know, put your kind of suggestions in the comments, and we'll give it a go. And if you want us to do a proper kind of brewing video, then again, let us know, and I'll do that as an additional video. So all these type of things will be additional video, it won't actually be the normal ones, and that's what I've done today. After this, I will be doing another review video, so I'll put both of them out together. You can watch both of them, or you can watch one or t'other, whatever you fancy. It's all one to me. But at the end of the day, it's still a review channel, and the main point of it is a review channel. If you want to do a little bit of brewing as well, and a little bit of experimentation, then yeah, I'm quite happy to give that a go as well, and do them as an additional videos. So let us know what you like and what you don't like. And I'm quite happy to go along with it, because I get enjoyment for both. So, thanks for watching, cheers, and bye for now.